It was a cold autumn morning, and the grey sky seemed to mirror the gloom of the city's bustling streets. At the corner of a narrow alley near a bakery, Lara, a girl of only 8 years, watched the movement with curious eyes. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she was already used to it. Her brown hair, tangled and unevenly cut, partially hid her face. An old, torn coat, far too big for her thin frame, wrapped around her like an insufficient hug. Lara wasn't sure how long she had been living on the streets. Memories of her mother, a woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, were still alive but blurry. Her mother had disappeared without explanation months ago, and since then, Lara had learned to survive on her own. It wasn't always easy. Some days she was lucky. A generous baker would give her some bread. On others, she spent hours rummaging through trash cans and found nothing. But Lara wasn't like other children. Despite everything, there was something resilient about her, a flame that refused to be extinguished. That morning, as Lara walked along the busy promenade, something unusual caught her attention. A small, shiny black object lay on the ground, almost hidden by the shadow of a parked car. Lara frowned. Curiosity, her inseparable companion, drew her closer. Carefully, she bent down and picked up the object. It was a leather wallet. Her heart raced. Sitting on a nearby bench, she opened the wallet with trembling hands. Inside she found neatly folded bills, organized with precision. There was so much money that Lara could hardly believe her eyes. Besides the money, there were credit cards and an identification card. The name on the ID read Dr. William Harper. The photo showed a man with grey hair and a serious but not unfriendly expression. Lara blinked, trying to process what she was seeing. It felt as if the universe had decided to offer her an escape, or at least a temporary reprieve. With this money, she could buy enough food to last for weeks, maybe even some new clothes, and perhaps, just maybe, a safe place to sleep. But a restlessness began to stir in her chest. What if this William Harper needs this money? She wondered silently. The wallet seemed important, and the credit card suggested that the owner was a doctor. Doctors were good people, weren't they? People who helped others? Lara vaguely remembered visiting a doctor when she was younger, someone who held her hand and assured her that everything would be okay. As she pondered, the city noise continued. Cars honked, people chatted in hurried tones, and no one seemed to notice the little girl with a faraway look, holding a wallet that clearly wasn't hers. Lara glanced around, as if hoping someone would come over and solve her dilemma. But no one did. Suddenly a memory flashed through her mind. It was her mother's voice, soft but firm. "Lara, always do what's right, even when no one is watching." The weight of those words made her clutch the wallet to her chest. The money could save her, but returning the wallet would be the right thing to do. The simple morality of a child was at odds with the harshness of her reality. As she wrestled with her thoughts, a deep voice interrupted her. "Hey, little girl, what have you got there in your hands?" Lara turned sharply. A tall man with scruffy clothes and a patchy beard was staring at her suspiciously. He seemed like one of the homeless people who sometimes wandered the area, but the glint in his eyes wasn't friendly. "None of your business," Lara replied, trying to hide the wallet behind her back. Her voice came out firmer than she expected. The man took a step closer. "Looks like you found something valuable. Why don't you share it with a friend?" Lara stepped back, her heart pounding so loudly she thought everyone around could hear it. "It's mine. I found it on the ground. It's not yours." The man let out a dry laugh. "Oh, is that so? Listen, kid, whatever you've got there, you don't need it all. Maybe I can help you spend it. What do you say?" Lara glanced around, desperate for an escape. People walked past her, indifferent, and no one seemed to notice what was happening. The man took another step toward her, and Lara realized she didn't have any time to lose. Clutching the wallet tightly, she jumped up from the bench and started running. Her footsteps echoed on the promenade as she weaved through people and parked cars. The man shouted after her, but Lara was small and quick. She soon turned a corner and ducked into a narrow alley, hiding behind a pile of cardboard boxes. Her hands were trembling, and the sound of her breathing seemed louder than anything else around her. After a few minutes, when she was sure the man hadn't followed her, Lara opened the wallet again. Dr. William Harper's face stared back at her. Now, more than ever, she had to decide what to do. Return it or not? she murmured to herself. The choice wasn't easy. Returning it meant giving up a rare opportunity. Not returning it meant carrying a guilt she might never shake. Lara took a deep breath and made an initial decision. She would try to find out who Dr. William Harper was. But how could an 8-year-old girl, alone on the streets, accomplish that? The money was a constant temptation, but something about the doctor's face, or maybe it was her mother's voice in her memory, kept her focused. For now, Lara knew she needed to leave the area. The city wasn't kind to children like her, and now, with a small fortune in her hands, she was more vulnerable than ever. The morning's chill was beginning to shift into the sharp air of the afternoon, and the wind blew harder as Lara walked through the city streets. Her hands were tucked into the oversized coat's pockets, gripping the wallet tightly. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of her decision was growing. Returning the wallet was the right thing to do. Lara knew that. But how? The city was enormous, and she had no idea how to find Dr. William Harper. The address on the cards meant nothing to her, street names and numbers that felt like they belonged to another world. Worse, the thought of approaching strangers to ask questions was terrifying. Lara had learned early on that trust was dangerous when you lived on the streets. She stopped in front of a shop window. The reflection in the glass showed her small, worn face, her large eyes filled with uncertainty. Beside her, in the reflection, she saw a woman leaving a cafe with a steaming cup of coffee. Lara's hunger tightened its grip, but she knew she couldn't spend a single coin from the wallet. "I can do this. I just need to find someone who can help," she murmured to herself. Lara decided to start with the obvious, ask someone where the address on the card was. But approaching adults was always risky. Many ignored her, some looked at her with disdain, and others might be like the man who had tried to take the wallet from her. After minutes of hesitation, she took a deep breath and chose a well-dressed woman waiting at a crosswalk. "Excuse me, ma'am," Lara began, her voice faltering. "Do you know where this street is?" The woman looked at Lara strangely before glancing at the card in her hand. For a moment, Lara thought she might help, but the woman shrugged and walked away without a word. It was always like this. Frustrated, Lara kept walking, her hunger and the cold starting to wear down her spirit. On an impulse, she stepped into a small corner market. The warmth inside was comforting, but it also made the smell of food even more irresistible. Passing shelves full of crackers and bread, Lara's stomach growled loudly. For a moment, she considered the money in the wallet. Who would notice if she used just one bill to buy something? "No," she said aloud, startling a nearby customer. Blushing, she hurried out of the market. Using the money felt wrong. More than that, it felt like betraying her mother's memory. Lara decided she needed to try something different. Near the market, there was a small public library, a place she sometimes visited to stay warm or browse forgotten children's books. Despite her appearance, Lara could read well. Her mother had always made sure of that, insisting that education was her greatest treasure. The library was quiet, except for the soft rustle of turning pages. Lara walked up to the front desk, where an elderly woman with round glasses was reading a thick book. The librarian looked up and studied Lara for a moment, as if assessing whether the child would be trouble. "Hello," Lara said, trying to sound confident. "I need help finding this place." The woman looked at the card Lara was holding, then at the girl. For a moment, Lara thought she might be kicked out, but to her surprise, the woman smiled kindly. "Let me see." The librarian typed something on an old computer. "This address belongs to a hospital nearby. Dr. William Harper works there." A hospital. Lara felt a mix of relief and anxiety. A hospital meant lots of people, lots of adults. What if someone thought she had stolen the wallet? "Do you know Dr. Harper?" Lara asked, trying to sound casual. The librarian shook her head. "He's famous, a renowned surgeon. I've heard he's saved many lives, but he's also very busy. Do you have something for him?" Lara hesitated. She didn't want to explain everything. "It's an important document. I want to return it." The woman smiled again. "That's very noble of you, dear. The hospital isn't far from here. Go up 2 streets and turn left. You'll see a big building with mirrored windows." Lara thanked her and left the library, but each step toward the hospital felt harder than the last. When she finally saw the imposing building, her palms were sweaty and her breathing was short. She stood on the other side of the street, staring at the busy entrance. Doctors and nurses came and went, moving too fast to notice a small girl standing on the sidewalk. Suddenly, an ambulance pulled up in front of the hospital, and a team of paramedics rushed out, pushing a stretcher. A man, likely the patient, was crying out in pain as a team hurried to help him. Lara watched the scene, feeling even smaller in front of this big, complicated place. "I can't do it," she murmured. Her resolve to enter the hospital evaporated. Maybe it was better to just leave the wallet by the entrance and disappear before anyone noticed her. But before she could make a decision, a man's voice spoke behind her. "Are you lost, young lady?" Lara spun around quickly. It was a man in a dark suit, with a serious but not unfriendly expression. He studied her with curiosity. I'm looking for someone," Lara said, stepping back slightly. The man looked at the wallet in her hands and frowned. "That wallet? Where did you get it?" Lara froze. The man seemed to know something she didn't understand. She clutched the wallet tightly against her chest, as if trying to shield it from the curiosity of the mysterious man. He was tall, dressed in a well-tailored dark suit, and his expression seemed to teeter between suspicion and concern. "I asked you where you got that wallet," he repeated, this time in a firmer tone. The girl took a step back, trying to hide the wave of fear rising in her chest. I found it on the street," she said quickly. "It's not mine." The man frowned, but didn't look angry. He glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone else was paying attention. "Do you know who it belongs to?" Lara hesitated. Was it safe to tell him? He seemed too serious, like someone who might drag her into the hospital and accuse her of stealing. "It's Dr. Harper's," she replied, her voice barely audible. The man relaxed slightly at the name. "Dr. William Harper is my friend," he said. "I work with him here at the hospital. You can give me the wallet, and I'll make sure it gets to him." Lara stood still. Something about his proposal felt off. She had seen people deceive others so many times on the streets. What if he was lying? She couldn't risk it. "I'll deliver it myself," she said, with a stubbornness that surprised even herself. The man raised an eyebrow. "Listen, kid, you can't just walk into a hospital and ask to see one of the busiest surgeons in the country. Giving the wallet to me is the best option." Lara took another step back, ready to run. But before she could move, he raised his hands as if to calm her down. "All right. Relax. If you want to give it to him directly, I can take you to his office, but you can't do this on your own." She looked at him, trying to gauge whether he was telling the truth. The man seemed sincere, but Lara knew better than most kids her age that appearances could be deceiving. However, she didn't have many options. If she tried to enter the hospital alone, she would probably be stopped. "Fine," she finally said, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. "But I'm going with you." The man nodded, seeming satisfied. He introduced himself as Richard, a hospital administrator, and began walking toward the entrance. Lara followed closely but kept a safe distance, still unsure of his intentions. When they passed through the automatic doors, the warmth inside made Lara realize just how frozen she had been. The hospital was larger and busier than Lara had imagined. People in white coats and blue uniforms moved back and forth, their expressions serious. A woman at the reception desk glanced at her curiously, but said nothing as Richard walked directly to the elevator. "You're lucky," Richard said as he pressed the button for the upper floor. "William is a very busy man, but he should be on a break right now." Lara didn't respond, gripping the wallet even tighter. As the elevator ascended, she felt fear and adrenaline battling in her chest. What if this was a trap? What if he didn't take her to Dr. Harper? She needed to be ready to run if something went wrong. When the elevator doors opened, Richard guided her down a long, quiet hallway. The walls were painted a beige color, and there were several doors with nameplates on them. At the end of the corridor, he stopped in front of a double door. "Wait here," he said. "I'll see if William is in his office." Lara stood still, watching as he entered. She could hear muffled voices from inside, but couldn't make out what they were saying. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, Richard returned, looking pleased. "You can go in," he said, holding the door open. Lara hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The office was large and tidy, with shelves full of medical books and a wide desk at the center. Behind it was the man from the photo in the wallet, Dr. William Harper. He looked even more serious in person, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't as intimidating as Lara had expected. "So you're the girl who found my wallet," he said with a slight smile. His voice was deep but carried a kind tone. "Thank you for bringing it back. That was very honest of you." Lara slowly approached and placed the wallet on the desk without saying anything. The doctor picked it up and checked the contents. "Everything is here," he said, impressed. "You didn't touch a thing." "It's not mine," Lara said simply. The doctor looked at her for a long moment. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lara." "Well, Lara, I have to say your actions were admirable. But what do you need? Why did you go through all this trouble to return it?" Lara remained silent. What did she need? Food? A place to stay? Or maybe something bigger, something she didn't even know how to ask for? Finally, she said, "I just thought it was the right thing to do." Dr. Harper seemed to think for a moment, his eyes carefully studying her. "Richard," he said, turning to the man standing by the door, "can you give us a moment?" Richard nodded and left the office, closing the door behind him. When they were alone, the doctor leaned forward slightly. "Lara, tell me, where are your parents?" The question hit Lara like a punch to the stomach. She lowered her eyes and clenched her fists. "I don't have anyone," she murmured. For a moment the doctor didn't respond. He sighed, looking deeply moved. "Listen, I want to help you," he said finally, "but I need to understand your situation." "It's okay, you can trust me." Before Lara could reply, the door suddenly opened. Richard entered again, but his expression was tense. "Sorry to interrupt, but something urgent has come up. We need you, William." The doctor nodded, standing up quickly. He glanced at Lara. "Wait here, I'll be back soon." Lara was left alone in the office, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect. But before she could fully process everything, her eyes landed on something on Dr. Harper's desk, an envelope with her name written on it. Her name. Lara stared at the envelope, her name written in neat, precise handwriting. How did he know her name? The doctor had only spoken a few words to her before rushing out, but now, alone in that imposing office, her curiosity burned like a fire. She reached out, hesitating before picking up the envelope. Lara wasn't sure if she should open it, but her mind swirled with questions. Why would someone as important as him write something for her? Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper inside the envelope. It contained a short note. "Lara, you made a brave choice by returning my wallet. Please allow me the chance to repay your kindness. I'll be back soon." The note didn't answer any of her questions, but something about those words made Lara feel a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't recognized in a long time. Before she could think much more about it, the door opened again and Richard walked back in, this time with a relieved expression. "Dr. Harper is still busy, but he asked me to take care of you until he gets back," Richard said, studying the girl. "You're hungry, aren't you?" Lara looked at him wary, but the hunger she had been trying to ignore was now impossible to deny. Reluctantly, she nodded. Richard smiled and gestured for her to follow him. They walked through wide corridors until they reached a small cafeteria inside the hospital. Richard bought her a sandwich and a juice, and she sat at a nearby table. With each bite, Lara felt her hunger ease, but her mind remained full of doubts. Who was Dr. Harper, really? Why did he seem to care about her? People rarely cared. At least, that's what Lara had learned while living on the streets. When she finished eating, Richard approached her again. "Let's head back to the office," he said. "Dr. Harper wants to talk to you." Lara followed Richard in silence, but deep down she felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. When they entered the office again, the doctor was there, seated behind his desk, now appearing less hurried and more focused. He looked up and gave her a genuine smile. "Lara," he began, his voice softer than before, "I've been thinking about what you did today. You know, very few people, even adults, would have had the courage and honesty to return something as valuable as my wallet." She stared at him, unsure of what to say. He continued, "But now, I need to understand more about you. Why are you alone? How did you end up here?" Lara lowered her gaze, the words catching in her throat. It was hard to explain everything, even to someone who seemed so kind. After a long silence, she finally said, My mom disappeared, and I don't have anyone else." The doctor sighed deeply, as if her story had confirmed something he already suspected. He stood and walked over to one of the office windows, looking out at the bustling world outside before turning his gaze back to Lara. "You know, Lara, I've also lost important people in my life, and I know how lonely the world can feel." Lara watched him, surprised. He didn't seem like someone who understood suffering. He was wealthy, important. But something in his expression told her he was being sincere. "I want to help you," he said finally. "If you'll let me." "How?" Lara asked, unable to hide the suspicion in her voice. Dr. Harper sat down again, folding his hands on the desk. "Well, first, I think you need a safe place to stay, a home. I can't just let you go back to the streets." The idea was both terrifying and tempting. A home? Something Lara had thought she'd never have again. But doubt filled her mind. "Why would he do this?" "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you want to help me? You don't even know me." The doctor leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. "Because sometimes we meet people who remind us of something important. You reminded me of a promise I made a long time ago, to always help those in need, especially when no one else seems willing to." Lara didn't know what to say. Her emotions were tangled. Joy, fear, distrust. She wanted to believe him, but believing was dangerous. "So you don't have to decide now," he said, noticing her hesitation. "But I want you to know that my offer is sincere. I have contacts who can help you find a permanent home. Or if you'd prefer, you can stay under my care for a while until you decide what you want to do." It seemed too good to be true. But before Lara could respond, something happened. The office door opened again, and a woman entered in a rush, carrying a folder of documents. "Sorry to interrupt, Doctor Harper, but there's something you need to see." He frowned, took the folder, and quickly scanned the papers inside. Lara watched, trying to understand what was happening. After a few seconds, he looked up with a serious but determined expression. "Lara," he said, closing the folder. "This might sound strange, but I need to ask you something. Your mother, was her name Sarah?" Lara's heart almost stopped. How did he know her mother's name? "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling. "Why?" "Doctor." Harper took a deep breath. "I think I've found something important about her. We need to talk, but first I need to check on something." Lara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What did he know about her mother? A mix of hope and fear overwhelmed her. What if he could help her find her? "Wait here," he said, standing and leaving the office with the woman who had brought the documents. Lara was left alone again, but this time her mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe returning that wallet had been more than just an act of honesty. Maybe it was the beginning of something much bigger. She waited in the office, her heart pounding as she tried to process what she had just heard. Her mind was full of questions. How did Dr. Harper know her mother's name? And what could he have discovered about her? The mix of fear and hope made her restless, and the silence in the room felt louder than ever. A few minutes later, though to Lara it felt like hours, Dr. Harper returned to the office. He was accompanied by the same woman who had brought the folder, and both of them looked serious but not alarmed. He sat down in his chair and looked directly at Lara. "I know this must all feel confusing, but let me explain," he began, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "Lara, I knew your mother." Lara's eyes widened, and she felt as if the air had been knocked out of her lungs. You knew my mum?" she asked, her voice shaking. The doctor nodded. "It was a few years ago. Sarah was one of my patients. She went through a very difficult time, but she was a strong, determined woman. The last time I saw her, she spoke about you. She said she would do anything to make sure you were okay." Lara felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But where is she? Why did she leave me?" The words came out in a whisper. Dr. Harper took a deep breath before answering. "When she came to me, Sarah was sick. She had been trying to handle everything on her own for a long time, and by the time she asked for help, her situation was complicated. I did everything I could for her, but there came a point where she had to make a very difficult decision. She knew she might not be able to care for you, and thought the only way to protect you was to ask for help from an institution. She thought you would be safer that way. Lara let out a quiet sob, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know what to think. She felt confused, hurt, but at the same time something inside her wanted to believe that her mother had done the best she could. And now? Is she still alive? She asked, her voice barely audible. The doctor hesitated, his expression softening. I don't know where she is now, he admitted, but I can help you look for her. If you want, we can start that search together. Lara stared at him, trying to decide if she could trust him. Everything inside her screamed that it was risky, but the warmth in Dr. Harper's eyes, his sincerity, seemed to break through her defenses. For the first time in years, someone was offering her a chance to start over. Do you promise? She asked, her voice filled with vulnerability. I promise, he replied without hesitation. In the days that followed, Lara stayed under Dr. Harper's care as he and his team began searching for information about her mother. True to his word, he used his resources and contacts to try to locate Sarah. In the meantime, Lara started to learn that the world wasn't as cold as she had come to believe. People like Dr. Harper and Richard showed her that kindness still existed. Although the search for her mother was long and filled with uncertainty, something inside Lara had shifted. She was no longer alone, and for the first time in a long while, she had something that resembled a family. One evening, while sitting in Dr. Harper's office flipping through one of the books on his shelf, she found another note he had left for her. This time it read, "The world brought you into my life for a reason. You reminded me how important it is to never give up on people. Thank you for giving me this chance to help." Lara smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, it felt like it could be bright.